where we worked together in building a Nigeria data portal. Where we got into really interesting work was around CityMark, where we accessed deeds registry data and started to explore the property market in a diversity that in South Africa hadn't been explored before. So we emphasized property prices at the bottom end of the market and really split out that bottom category. And we mapped it. So that's I don't know if you can, it's this report right here, the CityMark report. And we've been collecting that data and presenting it on dashboards, which I'll show you very quickly. And then we've started to carry on, and Alan Mutuma, who's part of our Kenya team, is here. And we have then started to work on the Open Access Initiative, which is an important program where we're working with developers and encouraging them to share their data about the development experience and all of the costs associated with that, so we can better understand how that influences the housing delivery and financing process. And that work we're doing in partnership with FSD Africa Investments, who really sponsored the start of it, FSDKenya, Real, and International Housing Solutions have been the founding partners of that work. All of this, what we're trying to get to is a point where we can answer the question, well, what is the investment argument? The investments that are happening, what are their performance? And performance, not just for the investor, but also for everything else, for the community, for the economy, for the households involved, for everything else. And then, therefore, what is required to build the investment opportunity? There we go. So we have some dashboards, and I'm sure that many of you have seen these. And oopsie, let's go back. Have seen these. On the left is the B40 dashboard, which 71.4 developed using data from the demographic health surveys, which is data that is collected by USAID. It's a program of USAID, and it's really interesting. And it's focusing on health issues, but of course they record housing issues as well. Then more recently with FSDKenya, we've been developing the housing developments in the Nairobi metropolitan area dashboard, so the NMA dashboard, we call it. And Beatrice Mwangi from our team in Kenya has been driving this, collecting data from developers across the Nairobi metropolitan area on what are the developments that they have currently underway, planned, underway, and finished. And what are the key data points relating to that that can then be analyzed either on a project by project basis, or you can choose all the developments with 3 bedrooms, or you can choose all the developments that happen to have solar panels. It's a really exciting dashboard. And at the moment, we're also trying to develop this in Nigeria with the consortium of Abuja builders. As a nice way of just showcasing development activity. Then on the left, we've got the CityMark dashboard, and there are 4 of those that are on our website with data all the way from, I think it's 2012 into the present, a long run of data. This is data that we buy from Lightstone in South Africa, because deeds registry data is not yet made available for public analysis for free. But we buy it from Lightstone, and we're very grateful that they sell us these indicators, which we can then use to show the diversity of properties and investments across the country, and also to start to explore mortgage lending exposure. And then on the right is the Nigeria Housing Data Dashboard, which 71.4 developed, and we launched last week. And I would really encourage you all to take a look at it. It explores households, and then on the basis of whether they're owners or renters in Nigeria, and gives lots of good demand side data. The second area that we've been focusing on is building understanding, and really just to understand the essence of how the markets function. And literally, I'll say it again, in real life, as opposed to the way we imagine it from what we've studied. And so we started with a bunch of concepts. So the housing asset triangle where housing performs as a private asset. It's a social asset, it's a financial asset, but it's also an income earning asset. Or the housing sector is actually a national asset where it contributes to economic growth and job creation. It builds sustainable human settlements, and it also contributes to financial intermediation. And that concept underpins all of the other things that we're investigating. Then still on the top on the right, we've been doing a series of construction cost benchmarking studies. And I think Yakas is in the room, Yakas Pinar. He's been driving this together with David Gardner and Keith Lockwood as part of the housing economic value chain studies. And there, what we're looking at is ways in which we can compare the components of construction costs, going from like, what's the price of the brick? And what does that then contribute to the overall building material costs? And then labor, and then infrastructure, and then land, to get a sense to where are the parts of the house inside that price that make it particularly expensive. And we've done it now in over 15 countries. And this really was something that led into the open access initiative that Alan Matuma is running. Then if we go down from that graph to the sort of bubbly graph on the bottom right, that's the housing economic value chain that has been developed by the team, David Gardner, Keith Lockwood, and Yakas Pinar. And what that does, it looks at it's an economic value chain that tracks the contribution of housing to the economy, and it's explicitly targeted at economists so that they can start to understand how significant housing is, not just as a social welfare intervention, but also as something that contributes to economic growth, particularly important when commodity-dependent economies are suffering decline in commodity prices. No better way to boost your economy than investing in housing. And then I've been through the value chain study on the left. So these concepts, and we're developing more as we evolve, and we're trying to think about different ways of understanding the market, are really trying to integrate the practice of how the market is functioning with a sense of understanding of the impact that then has on the overall economic growth and the opportunity for investment going forward. We've done so many research reports and case studies, and there are just a few here, and I'm sure that many of you have looked at some of them. I doubt everyone's looked at all of them, and there's lots there. It is a bit of a library, but it's not just a library, because the reason we do this is not just to put a report up on a website and display logos and so on, but really our intention and our hope is that this encourages practitioners to adjust their practice on the basis of what they learn from the work that we do. So there's a set of newsletters that David Chiwetu and our team has been developing around PropTech providers in Nigeria. And they're interviews with those PropTech providers. And we hope that will allow both other providers, but also investors, to understand what the opportunity might be in those places. Alison, can I just ask, is your screen showing other things beside the slide?
No.
No, great, okay. And so on. So there are so many, the research that we're doing is really to try and create a basis for which practitioners, whether they're policymakers or lenders or developers, to adjust and amend their products on the basis of what we're observing. The Housing Investment Chronicles, there's a pamphlet there based on the Uganda study we did, which really explored how do people spend their money on housing and how do they invest in it step by step based on the financial diaries research that others have done before. So there's lots to explore. The third area, having pulled together data, collected it and analyzed it and put it together in reports where we've really tried to explore our understanding, is engagement. And that's working with stakeholders across the continent. And the primary focus of that at the moment is, of course, well, it has been over the course of the history of the CAHF, has been our relationship with the AUHF. The African Union for Housing Finance is celebrating its 40th year this year at its conference, which I'll tell you a bit about later, in Zanzibar in October. And the head of the secretariat is Tandiwe Dlamini. And she is part of the CAHF team, but she wears her colors maroon and blue. And she is in full support of all 73 and counting members who exist across 23 countries. And really what the AUHF does is provide information exchange. We have our annual conference, which is becoming increasingly popular across practitioners, and then enabling introductions, both between members internally and then also more widely with other practitioners outside. So that's the African Union for Housing Finance. And the chairperson, Kehinde Ogundimu, is here with us, and he'll join the panel with Paul later. Another form of engagement that we're really proud of and very grateful to 71.4 for encouraging us to join them on this journey is with the Tenure Support Center. And this is not something that CAHF normally does. It's because the Tenure Support Center is a support office that exists within Khayelitsha. The office runs out of First National Bank's branch in the Khayelitsha Mall. And Sona, I believe, is in the room, who's part of the CAHF team. And she is the face of the Tenure Support Center. And she receives all of the clients who arrive at her office, listens to the issues that they might have with title deeds, and then puts together a case, which the team at the Tenure Support Center and then also at 71.4 then go about solving. The fabulous part about this work is that as this advice and support is given to households at the grassroots level, it also then provides an information base and a justification to lobby for changes at the national level within the policy framework. And Seth Maqetuka is here. He's with the City Support Program, and he's been a very strong supporter of the work of the Tenure Support Center. And continues to champion it within government to make sure that it gets the attention that it needs as an issue. We were really excited that last year it got adopted, or the year before last, it got adopted by Operation Vulindlela, which is a joint program of the Presidency and National Treasury as a multi-departmental issue that cuts across many departments that is worthy of national attention. So that's the TSC. And then finally, another area is professional development. We are delighted for an ongoing partnership with the University of Cape Town. I hope that Francois Virali is in the room. And in driving the housing finance program for sub-Saharan Africa. And we contribute just by providing some support and some lectures. And then last year, also with UCT, as well as with Erasmus University, IHS in Rotterdam, Hoffinet, and the AUHF and the African Cities Lab, we put together an online course. And it's 50 videos, including many of you, actually, and over 6 modules exploring the role and opportunity of finance in African housing markets. Okay, I'm almost finished. But I think it wouldn't be quite fair to celebrate without a bit of self-reflection. And so every 10 years or every year, we take a look at a bit of a SWOT. We've got some amazing strengths, and I'm completely chuffed about my team and the individuals and how they work with one another collectively. About the fact that we have an office in Kenya and a developing office in Senegal, that we are delivering very good projects and programs that are covering very relevant issues that people are saying that they like, that we're driving thought leadership in many areas, and that's contributing to the way in which other practitioners are able to operate in this space. So that's lovely. And I'm very, very happy for that. We've got some great opportunities now and looking over the next 10 years. An anniversary is always a great time to reflect and to say, well, why are we here? And how do we think about going forward further? There's some really lovely energy that's happening in Francophone Africa. And thank you so much to Christiana Agossa, our board member who's based there, as well as Aminata Barrow, our research manager based in Dakar. There is a global commitment to housing finance and affordability that I think wasn't there 10 years ago in the same way. Maybe that's because people are shouting a whole lot louder now than they were before. But I'd like to think that it's because we also can see the opportunities there. And there's so much that can be done. And in this continent, particularly so, when we face these crazy urbanization rates that put such pressure on governments as well as the private sector and also households to really survive in dense urban environments. The attention on housing finance and affordability is critical, and it's very good that it's shared by so many people. There's a widening global community of practice, and we're so excited that the Central American Development Bank, also called CAHF, ironically, and I hope that Claudia and Ana Claudia both are here in the room, that they've launched a housing finance yearbook, which will be published in November. So we're looking forward to seeing that, portraying the economies in some Central American countries and Latin American countries, pardon me. There is increasing interest in AUHF members, and thank you to all the AUH members who are here. And then we've got all sorts of new partnerships. I think another opportunity is the fact that we've caught on to the fact that in order to carry on with our work, we actually have to be sustainable as an organization. And we're really building that. And I'm so proud of the team that has come together. We have our Chief Operations Officer, Dorman Chimamiwa, who's with us. And he's taken the helm to make that a reality so that CAHF is something that we're not going to go away. I don't think we can go away. I think that the sector really needs this kind of information and support. And we want to be here to be able to do that. There are weaknesses and there are threats. We're getting pretty frustrated by the nickel and diming that we do because of our funding dependencies. And I know that everyone here has experienced that in one way or another. And we struggle to manage that. I think all NGOs do. And we have an idea, we want to run with the idea, and then we remember we have to pay for it. And so thankfully now Dorman is figuring out how to contain that enthusiasm. But it is a very difficult thing to balance. Our Francophone program needs capacity. And I think we finally clicked on how to do it, and we're getting there, but it needs attention. So we're very excited about a conference that's coming up, I'll tell you about just now. And as a result, or perhaps contributing to that, our English bias. And I apologize, but we need to improve that. Another weakness is breadth versus depth. And some people might say that that's a character flaw on my part. We are working very hard to engage with depth, but we are so interested with the breadth of all of it. And I figure the way to solve that is to grow the resources so we can do all of it at depth. But I look to my chairman, who often says to me, Kecia, less is more. There are a bunch of gaps in the issues we address, and there always will be. And I think we can find gaps in this list here too. And there's a level at which sometimes we have to follow our funders because they will give us funding. But then we also want to drive our program and drive a sense of what is it that housing markets need. And that tension finds its way into sometimes the gaps in the issues, the gaps that we're addressing because we're being responsive. But it's very difficult to be free to pursue things that people haven't noticed yet are important. We like to pride ourselves at being able to notice those things and to lead in the way. But again, that creates sometimes a funding challenge. Our threats, funder reticence regarding overhead costs. I think everybody here knows about that, and it's difficult. And funding cycles, for goodness sakes, they're never over. And we struggle with that too. I think another really serious threat is the availability of data, which we say we're championing. So it's both an opportunity and a threat, but it's a serious problem, how to access data that's good and solid and true. And if we have a dream of being the trusted source of data that we're trying to collect literally like on the street in certain places, how do we manage that? So issues of data quality and then building the capacity for data at country level. So thinking about all of that, our big focus has to be on sustainability because there's so much to do. We have no shortage of ideas. And lots of people are so interested. But we have to figure out how to resource that. So we thought we'd try the crowdfunding route as well, because I do get a sense that a lot of people are excited in what we do, but the way in which to support it feels sort of hard to connect to, right? So the DFIs in the room, we will come and talk to you, but also everybody else. If you want to be part of this and if you feel that this is something that you want to support, we've created a mechanism. We are very grateful for everybody who's been supporting the yearbook over the years. And in terms of that, this will be a new way of making that fund. So within the CAHF Sustainability Fund, you can either specify what you want to invest in, or you can say it's general. We will acknowledge everybody. We will tell you what we did with your money. But just to raise that is something that we are thinking about as we go forward. So save the dates. We have 2 conferences coming up, one in September and one in October. In Abidjan is a conference focusing on the impact of housing on the economy. And we are very excited that we have ministerial support from the Ivorian government. And we're very excited that there will be a lot of ministerial participation from the region. And in some ways, this is a bit of a kickoff for us to say, we've done work in the region, we want to do more, help us think about what that is. And so that's the conference in Abidjan in September. And then in October is the 40th annual conference of the African Union for Housing Finance. So that is the 40th anniversary, which is why it's called Building to Last, because we're talking about real sustainable institutions, as well as sustainable housing and sustainable cities and so on. And for that, we're partnering with ISMA, which is the International Secondary Mortgage Market Association. And we're very excited for that. That's happening in Zanzibar, which is a lovely, attractive location. So please come. And the agenda on both of those will be really exciting. Okay, so to say thank you and to close, thank you to everybody. What can I say? And I'm sure that we've missed people here, so forgive me. But we are so grateful for all of your engagement and interest. It makes such a difference to know that you like the work that we do. We really want to know when you don't like it. So tell us so that we can adjust and think twice about what we just did and understand how that fits within a wider debate. So we're very keen for all kinds of feedback. So thank you to the team here and in Kenya and in Senegal. Thank you to our board, Paul, and your colleagues on the board. Thank you to our funders. Thank you to our partners. And lastly, thank you to all of you. We're getting comments from you, whether it's on WhatsApp or on LinkedIn or wherever. And this is just a sample, but thank you everyone for this. It really helps. It helps practically because it's nice to show everyone else how much people like us, but it also is a really nice thing just to think that what we've done is appreciated. So I'm very grateful. And that's it from my side. And I'd like to invite now Paul Jackson, and maybe you can come here, Paul, or actually, no, there's fine because you'll be looking this way. And I'll pull up give me a second to pull together to find my mouse, sorry. The panel. I would like to. Everybody's there already. Hallelujah. Hello, everyone. Can you turn on your cameras? Hello.
Can they talk?
Hi.
Kecia, the chat's now open if people want to introduce themselves.
Excellent. And we can see, yes, 42 people have commented. Please, everyone in the room, sign yourself in and leave a comment in the chat. Tell us who's there, where you're coming from. And it would be really nice for everyone to be able to connect with one another. We have 7 panelists. I think Beatrice and Aminata are not panelists, but there's Christian, yes. Hello.
So you're just missing Seth, Lorraine.
And
So
she's apologized, she's unable to make it. Yeah.
So our panels, Kehinde, Agossa, sorry, Kehinde from AUHF.
Yes.
Christian Agossa from
Hi.
board welcome. Seth Maqetuka from Cities Network. Seeta from AFD.
No, FSD.
FSD.
Kenya.
And Lorraine was AFD, apologies.
Exactly.
Right, guys. And so there's 2 simple questions. Now, Kecia, given the presentation you just made, I think we'll focus more on the second question, which are what are the key questions that we have to answer going looking forward for the next 10 years? And then panelists, your responses, if you would like to say, well, your view of what's changed, particularly where you work over the last 10 years, to weave that in to what are the key questions that we have to answer in the next 10 years? And so, because I think we've got enormous progress, Kecia's presentations just showed where we as Africans have come from, and also CAHF's role in that. But of course, the experience is much wider than that. So the question is, what are the key questions? And if you could list any 2 or 3 panel members, I'd be grateful. And Kenny, can we start with you? Only because you're on the top left-hand side of the screen. We're going to go from down to the bottom, and then Seeta will pick you up directly afterwards. How would you like the chat group to engage? Can people just
they can
send us questions as we go along?
And we can watch that. We'll look in the chat.
Interactive. And then lastly, Kecia, how long would you like this to go on for?
For about half an hour.
30 minutes, guys, to solve the problems of the next, or at least put the key questions on the table. Kenny, over to you, and welcome.
Thank you, Paul, and congratulations to AUHF. We have felt the impact of, CAHF, I say AUHF, I'm not sorry, CAHF, especially in Nigeria. We've had a lot of partnership with CAHF, and it's helped us to get things moving in Nigeria, especially even with government, because you need data to plan and to make, to design proper interventions, and we are beginning to see that come to bear in Nigeria. The question is, the first one was, how far have we come? Affordability, has it, what's the situation now and 10 years ago? Unfortunately, the experience in Nigeria is that it's gotten worse in terms of affordability. And, you know, when we talk about affordability, we are comparing household expenditure on housing over household income. So we have seen the rate of increase in household expenditure on housing, which either be mortgage or rent. The increases have outpaced the increase in income. So you have seen that people are spending more, but their income is not able to catch up with that. So I'll say it's affordability is getting worse just from that. And it's just not just a Nigerian thing. I think globally, we're seeing that even in the US and everywhere, you know, just income is not keeping pace with inflation and all of that. So that's a big challenge for everyone, but most especially for us. And the reasons are diverse. You know, you have the high inflation that we are currently experiencing in Nigeria, which has led to significant increase in housing construction costs. You also have a change of taste. I was discussing with a colleague about 10, 20 years ago in Nigeria, maybe a 3-bedroom house would probably just have 1 bathroom and 1 toilet. Now everybody wants to have maybe 4 toilets and 4 baths, So even the taste has changed and it has increased the cost. So it's not just the inflation, but even the cost of the kind of houses we are building now. It's no more about functionality. I think luxury is beginning to creep into what would ordinarily have been affordable, and then you don't have the other issues about poor planning and local content input and all of that. But the good thing is that with CAHF now, we're beginning to at least see the data. We're beginning to, in the past, we were in the dark, but now we know what exactly is happening. And so, as I said earlier on, it is easier now to make good plans and then design proper interventions. I think what I will want to see in the next 10 years is, and I believe Kecia covered it, so we've seen a lot of breadth, but now we need to see depth, because even in a country like Nigeria, when we do studies, we paint the picture as if Nigeria is the same, so a house in Lagos is the same as a house in Abuja, as a house in Maiduguri. But we know even the topography is different. It's much more easier to construct house in northern part of Nigeria, which is more like arid to desert-like regions than the waterlogged places like Lagos, Port Harcourt, and things like that. So I think we need to begin to dive deeper. And I'm saying that in Nigeria, but I mean that's across Africa. But even within countries now, maybe our research now has to be a little more specific to regions and all of that, so that we are the reports and data that we have speaks to specific locations, even within the country. But I would say, by and large, it's been a fantastic job by CAHF, and I'm looking forward to another 10 years of fabulous data generation, data interpretation, and things that will help decision makers make better decisions. Maybe I'll pause there.
Let me add one quick follow-up question. The data that is available, do you believe that the authorities, decision makers are in fact starting to use it more than they did? And would use of data more broadly within the public sector, particularly in Nigeria or in the private sector, significantly change things?
So I think we've had good engagement in Nigeria. CAHF especially been at the forefront, even sometimes discussing with government agencies, and even the minister, our current minister of housing, is somebody that was in the housing business and had some engagements with CAHF, even as the managing director of FMB, which is the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. So it's easier now for us to get access to people in authority and to say now, oh, we have these. I think one of the key things that CAHF produced, which helped us in Nigeria, is the value chain, the thing produced by David. I don't know what the name is again, just showing the contributions of various segments of the entire ecosystem, and saying this is the contribution that you have from this and all of that. So people are beginning to see much more deeper into, okay, we need to focus on materials, we need to focus on planning and all of that. TK, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the name of that exercise that was done by David, but it was fantastic, and
the housing economic value chain.
Exactly, the housing economic value chain. So that really resonated with policymakers in Nigeria, and then we're also using the experience of CAHF in other African countries, which has now streamlined data that we need for decision making to about 117 data points that we can gather, And so we'll be speaking with the ministry, we'll be speaking with the Statistician General, just to begin to do that now. So I'll say the economic value thing was what just put on the light bulb here in Nigeria. And then a lot of effort have been going on with CAHF just to give us good information and good data. So we really appreciate the effort of CAHF in Nigeria.
Thanks, Kenny. Seeta, what questions do we have to ask and address in the next 10 years going forward, do you think?
Thank you so much, and congratulations to everyone for this journey. And we all acknowledge that the journey ahead will be, more like just more exciting with that deeper collaboration. I wanted to add to everything Kehinde said that the need is greater, particularly with climate shocks. So to give a granular statistic that really hurts me is in the last month, there have been 30,000 households that have been demolished along the river in informal settlements in Nairobi because of the floods. And this is just the start of what we're going to see. So the need is greater. And as we look forward, I think we just have to apply the lessons we've already learned. I feel we're relearning lessons and somehow we feel there's magic out there, but there is no magic bullet. And I'm really fortunate that I attended the full 8-day housing finance course for Sub-Saharan Africa that was taught by University of Cape Town and the Wharton School in Kenya in April. And it just gave me a refresher of what I did in my 2-year MBA exactly 20 years ago when I started under Professor Maria. And some of the things that came up, which were like, these are obvious lessons. They've been there for decades. So how can we going forward try to apply them? And the first one is time value of money. It was quite astounding that as practitioners in the room, we're not giving enough attention to time value of money. And how will we do that? So let me give you an example of an exercise that I think Professor Francois and Professor Maria led. And they asked the participants, they didn't ask them to calculate it fully, but they walked them through calculating the cost to the government of a 25-year fixed rate, long-term, low interest rate subsidy, because all the interest rates in all our countries are very high. So if the government chooses to support affordable housing with a fixed rate subsidy over a very long period, it was a light bulb moment for everyone. It's like, this is what it costs us, and we don't put it on our balance sheet. And should we be? Because when we make these very fixed rate programs, the cost is an opportunity cost to other households who could get it. So I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, can we quantify our subsidy and all our investment better so we can direct it better? And we came away with the lesson that I know was known for decades, like we don't need 20, 25-year subsidy. We only need 7 or 10, because by that time, the household will have been able to pay more. So that's one question, that if we've known this lesson, how can we as practitioners start applying it? To flip the time value of money on the other side is something that CAHF and FSDKenya have really worked on, and that's understanding the regulatory framework in Kenya. So I was astounded, and we have a Git book on CAHF's website that they update with all the laws and policies that touch the Kenyan housing market, and we came across 140. We're trying to track 30 approvals a developer needs to be able to build in Nairobi. And I thought that was new and it was groundbreaking, but I was shown a slide from Malaysia, it's the same very complicated, like mushroom mycelia, and that's how approvals have been for decades, So how do we take the time value of money to approvals? Because honestly, the cost of our time for delivering is more than the cost of the money. And we need to remember that our programs are very time bound. So I'm doing a 4-year review of my 5-year program, and I'm behind on all my aspirations. I had really great aspirations in 2020, and I'm not there. The funder acknowledges our work. The funder acknowledges our effort. But because of this very, very complicated regulatory environment, we're not where we want to be. And that's possible to fix. It doesn't need money. In fact, it's keeping money out. So I think I just really, again, Professor Maria showed like the drive to try to simplify building codes. You don't need parking. Everybody doesn't need an ensuite bathroom, etc. But we seem to be wanting to be over aspirational when most of our population continues to be housed in the informal settlement. So it's really asking ourselves, how can we try to be more practical and say, let's walk the ladder step by step. We don't need to have this goal that we're going to take someone out of an informal settlement and put them in, where they want to be for life. It's not practical. It doesn't happen in our house, but as policymakers and practitioners, we seem to think we can make it happen in our work. And so I'd just like to conclude by saying, one of the things I'm most passionate about with all the partners Kecia mentioned, FSD Africa, FSD Africa Investments, REAL, IHS, is the Open Access Initiative. And that's where we want to get real about how long it took us, what the costs were, what the time was, and who lives there. If the family who lives there earns more than we wanted, that's okay. It's not a failing of our work. It's the reality of our market. And only by knowing that reality of our market can we iteratively go lower. But if we're not willing to confess the reality, how will we address our market? So, trying to just say, please join the Open Access Initiative. Please share your data. Whatever it is, it's very valuable and valiant effort. And let's use that to move the needle. So I think I'll stop with that and take any questions if I need it. But the big questions we need to ask are our time value of money in cost of finance and our time in delivery. Thank you.
Thanks, Seeta. That was very powerful. Thank you very much. I have no follow-up questions. So, Christian, can we move to you and get a sort of perspective, a francophone perspective, but your perspective on what are the key questions that we need to answer?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. And thank you all for attending this panel and this conference too. If I were to share some few regarding the Francophone Africa perspective that I'm more familiar with, and looking at where we were 10 years ago and where we are today, from my experience, I would say that things has not changed so much. There is a greater awareness of housing as an economic sector, I guess, between a number of decision makers, but the general feeling is that we still don't know how to tackle the issue, nor from economic policy side, we don't know what are the appropriate tools to cope with the many challenges that come with affordable housing and affordable housing in our countries. We don't know what is the appropriate regulatory framework that should be promoted to make it easier for developers to get financing or household to access financing. But overall, there is a greater awareness of the need to do something. A number of tools have been promoted since 10 years. For instance, the company I used to manage until a year and a half ago, the refinancing facility, liquidity facility, to make it easier for households to access mortgages. But it's quite marginal. It's quite marginal. Most of the time, governments came to believe that the right solution was large-scale public housing policy programs. For instance, in Senegal, the 100,000 unit social housing program. In Côte d'Ivoire, it was 150,000. But after 10 years, barely 5,000 units have been built in Senegal, and roughly the same thing in Côte d'Ivoire. So we went from reforms to reforms, searching for the appropriate way to tackle the issues. If I were to identify some positive signs, I may say that a number of tools have make it easier for DFIs to invest in the social housing sectors. For instance, when we set it up, the CRH, it make it easier for AFC to be a shareholder, and the World Bank, we succeeded in setting up a program with the World Bank, an affordable housing program with the World Bank for the 8 French-speaking countries of West Africa. This was positive, but beyond that, what else? Okay, in a country like Benin, for instance, they succeeded in building roughly 9,000 units, according to the most recent information I have. So probably it won't. There will be in Benin the only one program succeeding in producing roughly 10,000 units in 10 years. I mean, in 8 years, let's say. But beyond that, practically nothing. So what have you learned? Basically, I will say that money is not enough. That's the first lesson for me. Money is not enough because at the beginning, we believe that the most important issue was to provide long-term money and that all of the other factors will adjust. It came out that money is not enough, that taxation, the cost of administrative procedure can easily whip out totally the competitiveness you can bring with raising money in the local financial markets. Mm. And sometimes even you can have access to the American or European financial market to finance social housing. You still need to control cost at home to make it competitive for household. The second lesson that, as I was saying, is that large housing program by government is not a solution. We need to find ways to promote private sector participation in social housing on large scale too, and also to solve all of the administrative hindrances that make it difficult to access financing for developers as well as for households. And low income, access to finance for low income households is by far and large the main issue, and it is totally unsolved today. Low income people bears higher, I mean, the cost of accessing housing for them is practically twice for for a middle income household. So it's often practically impossible for most of them. So if we turn to the future, what we should be looking for in the 10 years to come, I'll come back to the data issue, because the main point for decision makers from my point of view is that without data, they don't know where to start from. It's still difficult for the minister in charge of housing to go to the prime minister or to the minister of finance to say, okay, if you give me 10 billion CFA for housing program this year, the impact on the GDP will be 1 point, 2 points, or 3 points. It's very difficult for him to say that. We need to gather data that helps to explicit the impact of investment in housing and construction on GDP so that to change the priority of housing programs, of housing policies in the set of public policies. So this is the first point for me. And the second point is to try to elaborate a type of basic framework that includes, as well as the regulatory framework we need, or the taxation framework we need to promote a basic social housing program, so that the real, the household who needs those housing units can benefit them effectively. Because most of the time, the structure we have in place at the end just make it easier for middle income household to benefit more and more from those programs instead of low income and irregular income household. And at last, the third point is obviously sustainability, climate change impacts on housing. How do we proceed to promote the use of local materials to help building more sustainable housing? I believe this is a very important point, and it will be the last point I would like to see us working on for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Some points starting to resonate across the inputs, and thank you for that. Seth, last but not least, city's network perspective.
Yeah, a point of correction there. City support program, not cities network. Otherwise, I'll be in big trouble. Anyway, let me just also convey my congratulations to CAHF for this milestone achievement to be celebrating the 10th anniversary. And we have a very productive and a healthy partnership with them. And I'm hoping that one of the questions that we should be asking ourselves, how do we sustain and how do we grow this partnership going forward? But for me, coming back to the issues being raised, I think we all know the history of housing, in South Africa, especially the past 10 to 20 years, that we pride ourselves for having delivered more than, 4 million housing opportunities across the country. And which is a great achievement in global, terms. But in the process of chasing numbers, there were a number of mistakes that were made in the process. And some of them basically, in chasing numbers, we basically, used cheap land to build houses. And most of those land basically, they have sprawled our cities. And the poor people now have got to bear, the cost of traveling long distances from home to work. And some of those settlements also, or townships, do not even have social and economic amenities. And the other issue, basically, it's really the issue of the security of tenure, because also in that process as well, we're also sitting with a problem where some of the people that have received houses cannot participate effectively, in the residential property markets because of titling, problems that are related to the issues of township establishment, the issues of bulk infrastructure. Some of houses, are locked to deceased estate, are problems. And so there's a plethora of issues. You can imagine then if you do not have a title or you do not have a house as an asset that you can use to go up, the residential ladder, and also to participate effectively in the economic market, then it becomes a very big problem. And having said that, we do also have growth, in informal settlements, that we see as we developed more houses. We have also seen growth when it comes to informal settlements, and also the new phenomenon of backyarders, because not everybody could have access to the formal type housing. And the only option that they had now that was affordable was to basically build themselves, informal, houses, and some of them, building backyard, housing. I still remember one time, when I was in Cape Town, we used to pride ourselves that we are doing a great work in terms of law enforcement, ensuring that the informal settlements are not growing, not knowing that whilst we were, making the informal settlements not to grow, the backyarders were basically, spreading on the other hand. And so it's quite a very complex, situation and complex that we face. And having posed those scenarios and challenges, there have also been quite a number of good work that we have seen in our cities, and also just in the country, as a whole, in really trying to address some of those issues, which we are pursuing as the city support program. The question for me is really that these pockets of good and best practices that we see them, happening in the areas that I'm going to be mentioning, how can we scale them? I think the issue here is really about scale, to me. And one of the areas now which I've mentioned is the area of small-scale affordable rental. We do recognize that it's a market that is there. It's a market that is thriving. And if you look at cities like Cape Town, you look at cities like City of Joburg, they are beginning now to provide, some enabling support through regulation and also partnering, with those, landlords in terms of the support. And but these are just small pockets, of best practices. I think we really need to say now, how can we scale these practices in terms of a program, so that there could be a programmatic approach instead of just being, small pockets. And so that for me would be one area. And I think the small scale affordable rental in the township, it offers economic opportunities. It offers also high, densification, opportunities. And also it offers, the small people basically, providing income and also affordable rental. The next issue, Chair, is the issue of titling. I think the issue of titling restoration, it's a very critical issue that we really need to scale it up as well in terms of regularization and in terms of, preservation. How do we scale up titling so that people can really, with title deeds, functional title deed restoration, they can be able to participate, meaningfully, into the economy. And so we are also, working with the cities, in this regard. And we've also escalated this program into a presidential program, under the Operation Vulindlela Project program, because we felt that it's not just one program that can be led and driven by just housing. You need a multi-sectoral approach between the deeds office, the Department of Justice, Home Affairs, so that there's an integrated approach that is going to enable the cities basically to be able to address the issue of security of tenure, especially with regard to the titling, program. The other issue, Chair, that I think in terms of scale, it's really the issue of space making. I think with our BNG or RDP type housing, we really did not pay a lot when it comes to space making, the issues of high density, investment and incentives. It's one area that I think we need to pay attention to, and also the issue of the provision of investment or, in social and economic, amenities. And township establishment, township, economic development, it's another area that we need to be paying attention, through the housing delivery process. And last, not least, it's the issue of housing as a labor market. There was a brilliant study that was done by the Cambridge University lab recently, which was launched in South Africa. One of the greatest argument that is coming from that study basically is that we cannot just be building houses without paying attention to job creation and also sustainable livelihoods. And I think it's another area that basically we really need to be, paying attention to going forward. The issue of infrastructure planning and provision, most of our townships basically and settlements, the infrastructure provision, it's reached its capacity. And so we really need now to be paying attention when it comes to infrastructure, the link and bulk infrastructure, planning. And this is basically one area that we are now taking it by the horns, as National Treasury, looking basically at infrastructure, provision, especially with regard to trading services, because we're saying to the cities, they cannot just be providing, infrastructure and not generating some revenue and income. How do we incentivize the municipalities now to reuse their, bulk and link infrastructure in a manner and a way that is going to increase revenue into their cities so that they can be able to plow back, into their space. The issue of data that the colleagues have mentioned, brilliant work that we started with CAHF, where we used to develop, reports for the 8 metros, and work that is even, is rolling out now to the secondary cities. I think this is brilliant work that has given rise to the work that we're doing, like the TSC, the titling, because through those reports, we're able to help the cities basically, to come with more evidence-based planning and also evidence-based, initiation of the projects. And I think that's one area that I think we'd really need to be paying attention to, the area of evidence-based planning, as well as, housing, delivery going forward. How do we scale that? And how do we ensure that each and every city in the country, they really start basically, to be prioritizing the issue of data collection, analysis, to enable them, to do more proper planning. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Seth. That was also very rich. I guess it is up for me to try and summarize some of the main points. And then maybe we can get a last comment from panel members. And so there were a number of really important points, I think. And the first relates to data. And not only the generation of data, but the use of it. How do you make the kind of points that we're making, evidence-based planning, things that work. And I guess the point that that I think Christian was making is that, data is very important to inform programs. There's that old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And it's very, very important we start to use the data to understand where we're going. Seeta made two very, very important points. Was around the concept of the time value of money. In other words, the longer it takes, the more expensive it's going to get. But she touched on, I think, a really important component is how is the regulatory framework hindering and adding to the cost of housing? And I think that's a very, very important point. I think this was also echoed somewhat by Christian in his observations on the data component. I'm an economist, and so Christian, I'm going to be jumping on, how do we inform the tools of economic policy? And coming back to Seth, making a lot of discussion about Professor Hausman's input into labor markets and sustainable livelihoods is that, what are the tools that make economic data and housing is part of the real economy? Because I think we need to, and this is now Paul speaking, but we need to make the point that if you build a house in a certain area, it could be economically net negative. But if you build the same house in a different area, it could be economically net positive. And I think that I'd like to just pick up then on Seth's comment about how does local government get revenue. And I think one of the things that's missing perhaps in our debate is what are the fiscal impacts of housing? If you're creating new infrastructures, social, administrative, and physical infrastructures, what is that relative to a discussion elsewhere? And how do we use data and use local authorities to make those kind of choices? Because it all boils down to what are you going to spend your 10 rand there or 10 US dollars in a different place. I think the idea of sustainability and particularly the effect of climate came through quite strongly. And I think the recent floods in Kenya, we get them in South Africa every now and then too, and particularly hitting low-lying areas. And we get a lot in the Western Cape. So I was sorry to read about the events in Kenya, but climate shocks, Christian also made the point. How do we bring this in to sustainability? And then the last comment I'd like to make, which I think is a critical comment, it's particularly perhaps more pertinent in South Africa currently, is this concept of urban densification. You need a certain level of densification for economic and social action. And how do you, what's the word you use? Space making, Seth. I like that. How do you create the spaces? How do you make sure that you can support development in the right place? So with that, have I missed the point, panel? Anything you would like to emphasize or correct me on, please? And just go through, talk if you've got a point. I see lots of shaking heads.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Can I come?
Oh,
Go for it, Seth.
Yeah, I think the only point that I think it's very important and to be emphasized in the next 10 years, what we've been talking about, what we have really not done so well as the country, is really the alignment of housing with public transport, especially increasing our densities along transport corridors, and I know that some of the cities like Joburg, they are really looking into this matter, and at eThekwini, they are looking into this matter. And really, how do we really look into that issue very strategically and very deliberately, going forward, so that it's really not just a talk, but it becomes a practice that can be scaled going forward. And so I think it's one area basically that needs to be explored quite extensively in terms of ensuring that it gets implemented. Thank you, sir.
That's it. One of the things I would want to echo on that is that certainly in my assessment, certainly in South Africa, but I feel it happens in other African countries, is that you have policy and you have practice. And there's a large disconnect. Policy says X, but practice is doing completely something different. In fact, often contradicting policy. And how do we make, you talk about housing and transport, but there are quite a few policy and practice disconnects, that being one of them. And how do we use data and get informed decision-making, particularly from the public sector, so that you enable a private sector response. And with that, Kecia, can I hand back to you with thanks to the panelists? Thank you very much, guys. It's interesting for that input.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have a cake, We do. We have a birthday cake, which we would love to share with you, but we haven't worked out that part of the technology quite yet. I want to thank very much the panel and for the thought that you put into your comments, and we'll definitely take those to heart and think quite carefully about them. I am so grateful to be able to work with all of you. We all are, and we learn so much through the collaborations and really rely on them. CAHF wouldn't be here if it weren't for everyone in this room, as well as all those who weren't able to make it. Our network is actually enormous, and we're very grateful for this rich collaboration that comes with all of you. We are forever interested in hearing your views to guide us in ways that are useful for the growth of the industry. And we look forward to working with you further into the next 10, 20 years, however long we carry on, as we all work so hard to try and address working housing finance markets across the continent. So thank you. And thank you to everyone here and people who came just to drop by. Thank you. It's really lovely that you're here. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Very, very grateful. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.